So, hello class. Today we'll be learning about the conditions that led to guerrilla warfare in Guatemala. So, to recap on what we learned yesterday, I'll be sharing my screen to give a little refresher. Guatemala in the 1930s was facing a lot of disparity in socioeconomic status, and most of this could be attributed to how the land was not evenly distributed amongst the people because of the U.S. company, the United Fruit Company, as they were taking advantage of the land. And land was just not evenly distributed amongst the people, and mostly big landowners and elites had all the land and the wealth. And the president at the time was not really a big help and even further oppressed, as he was highly oppressive and just considered himself like another Napoleon. And this led to him to be eventually overthrown, but just led to a lot of unrest in Guatemala and mistrust in their government practices and the U.S. itself, since Jorge was very... he supported the U.S. a lot, especially the United Fruit Company. And eventually all this unrest led to the Guatemalan Revolution, which was characterized by the use of guerrilla warfare. So to understand what guerrilla warfare is, it's aggressive combat strategy, uses small, irregular, fast-attacking groups, usually to go against the more traditional military. And in Foco theory in the Cuban Revolution, Che Guevara suggested that a small number of daring guerrillas could spark a national revolution by using this guerrilla warfare tactic. And it's important to look at because it resulted in a lot of mass killing, and it's important to understand the conditions that led up to that. So your homework last night was to decide what condition you believe to be the most influential to the rise of guerrilla warfare in Guatemala. So who wants to go first?
I can go.
Okay, share your screen.
I believe the most influential condition that led to the Guatemalan Revolution and the rise of guerrilla warfare was Castro's success in the Cuban Revolution. After the American-backed coup de Barbens in 1954, many revolutionaries were afraid to revolt because of the possibility of U.S. hostility. The fear of United States hostility and revolutionaries was only partially subsided when news of Castro's revolution spread throughout Latin America. Castro's ability to overtake Batista and stand up successfully against the United States inspired revolutionaries to do the same. Now that Guatemalans saw it's possible to overcome the United States, nationalism spread throughout Latin America and Guatemala, resulting in innovations to the Guatemalan military. The newfound nationalism within Guatemalans led to increased tensions between Guatemalan revolutionaries and the Guatemalan government. This tension developed into warfare when Castillo Armas, a U.S. instilled politician in Guatemala, authorized the CIA to build a base in Guatemala that trained Cuban exiles to overtake Cuba. Many Guatemalan army and nationalist officers did not want to attack Castro for United States interests, however, and Castro's ideologies of unity pushed Guatemalans to ultimately rebel against the corrupt government.
Okay, thank you. That was very insightful. Who wants to go next?
Me.
Okay, share your screen.
Castro definitely played a role, but I think that the real reason for guerrilla activity in Guatemala was U.S. interference. The U.S. was obsessed with stamping out any slivers of communism, and often used anti-communism as an excuse to protect their business interests in Latin American countries. After problems with the United Fruit Company, the U.S. had a close eye on Guatemala. So when it accepted the Communist Party as a legitimate political party, the U.S. was afraid that the Soviet Union would take over. So in 1954, the CIA overthrew Arbenz's government in the name of anti-communism and installed an oppressive anti-communist dictatorship under Armas, therefore protecting U.S. business interests but hurting Guatemalan people. Because Armas took back the land given to smaller farmers and gave it to big landowners, the Guatemalan people got angry. The tension between this U.S. instated government and the Guatemalan people was what created the conditions for guerrillas to form.
Hey, I have a timeline. Does anyone want to see it?
Sure.
Now we will cover a timeline of the rise of the guerrilla warfare. Because the United States performed a coup on November 13, 1960 by Colonel Pereira, the first guerrilla group was formed in February 1962 by Sosa Lima and Esquivel. They called themselves the Guerrilla Movement Alejandro de Leon November 13. February 6, 1962 marks their first official act as a group where there was an attack on the military and the robbery of the United Fruit Company where they took money and weapons. February 10th, the rebels then shot down a Guatemalan Air Force plane. February 14th, President Guerilla announced that the government would be fighting back, but there are 100 rebels who were trained in the United States just like their army was. In March, a new guerrilla group was formed by Lieutenant Colonel Paz Tejada after the destruction of the last one, and it was called the October 20th Front. They had blamed their president for the political issues, economic crisis, no human rights, and increased poverty. On March 16th, the president let 40,000 soldiers take control of their city, where 20 students were killed and 200 were injured in a revolt a few days prior to that. Within the next month, the rebellion came to an end as they no longer had a clear direction in their fight against the government, and the increase of repression stopped any organizing of a revolt. A year later, December of 1963, a new politico-military group of guerrillas called the Rebel Armed Forces had formed. This group included the original Alejandro de Leon, November 13th, and 2 other groups. Over these first few years of the guerrilla warfare, there had not been many successful revolts due to inexperience, but they had continued with their fight.
Well, Maddie, you're wrong, because without Castro, Guatemalans would not have had the nationalistic ideals that caused them to rebel in the first place.
Well, actually, you're wrong, because without the U.S. interference, the Guatemalan people would not have had something to be angry about.
You're probably right, but let's just ask them.
Who?
The audience.
Great idea. What do you think was the most significant condition that led to guerrilla warfare in Guatemala? Type it in the chat.